everyone. Happy Monday. It is a cold, gray day out, but it's never a bad day for kayaking. So as I'm floating around here, I thought it might be nice to share some tips from another person that was floating around for a while, astronaut Jim Kelly, an American who was up in space for almost a year. Tip number 1. Make a schedule. It's going to help you adjust to this new routine that we are all trying to figure out right now. And it's going to help that home environment just make itself work better. Tip number 2. Pace yourself. There's no rush to do a lot of things right now. And especially pacing yourselves, get some sleep. Sleep is, according to NASA scientists, really important when it comes to looking at our mental well-being, looking at our physical well-being, and really our relationships with other people. So make sure you're getting some sleep. Number 3, go outside. Even if it's cold and gray, it's still so nice to get some fresh air. As astronauts, they can't go outside very easily. So one thing that astronauts do to cope is they play sounds of nature, sounds of the earth, so that they can just hear what it sounds like. Tip number 4, find a hobby. Whatever you love to do, you should try to keep doing it in some way, shape. A shout out to Andrew Abraham, who's out fishing. Nothing's gonna stop you from fishing right now. My buddy Dan, who we're gonna check in with a bit, still making music. We'll show you how he and his band are still trying to make that happen, even though they're not together. Tip number 5 is to journal. Journaling is not just for feeling dramatic. Journaling's for everyone. I journal every day, every single morning when I wake up I journal. And what astronauts do for journaling and what the science has shown is it helps you place events in your life. So once things especially start improving here and you're journaling about it, you can see how things are progressing and getting better. All right, tip number 6 is to connect with others. What I'm doing right now. So astronauts, they're constantly video chatting with their families, they're connecting with students at schools around the world, and the research has shown that if you are isolated, then it can actually really hurt your physical health as well. So even though you might physically not be able to see people, you can at least do it digitally. So really make sure you're making the effort to do that. Tip number 7 is trust the experts. I found that most problems aren't rocket science. But when they are rocket science, you should ask a rocket scientist. So certainly there's a lot of places where all of you can get your information right now. The internet is a wide and wonderful place, but there's also a lot of places that you can get information that perhaps aren't the best. So make sure that you are relying on credible sources. CDC, great website, World Health Organization website. All right, so those are the tips from the astronaut floating around in space. I'm gonna float on back to my house and let's check in on what's happening in the news. All right, Monday, March 23rd. What's the news? What's happening, y'all? Big thing from Massachusetts is this morning, the governor issued a stay-at-home advisory that's going to take effect tomorrow, Tuesday at noon. What the stay-at-home advisory does is it closes non-essential businesses, and it really is encouraging all of us to continue with our social distancing measures. So what is open? Good question. A lot. So grocery stores are still open, gas stations, pharmacies, medical facilities, online commerce, restaurants. They're not prohibiting you from traveling. They're not prohibiting you from going outside for a walk, to a park.
Certainly, if we start seeing a lot of people congregating in certain areas, then some shutdowns will happen, probably in specific locations. But when it comes down to it, it's not going to do as much as it sounds, which we're not saying you can't leave your house. And to explain a bit more about this, there has been a few of these put into place around the United States so far already. So we're going to call in to my buddy Dan, Music Dan, who lives right outside of San Francisco. Dan works for the band The Story So Far as a tour manager, and he has his own band called Elder Brother. You can find them on music streaming for services. So let's go over to Dan. Where are you at? What's going on?
We're in Oakland, California. At first, there was a kind of a run on groceries, not a riot or anything, just, the grocery stores couldn't keep up with supply and demand. But everything's caught up now. But for a while, it was just vegan food. I was right next to an old man who, when I was looking for some food the first day that we heard there was going to be a lockdown, and he was looking at the plant-based ground beef, and he goes, "Plant-based? I don't want that." I'll take it.
Apart from hanging out with mouses and plant-based food, what else has been happening?
Been watching a lot of movies. Been playing guitar. And taking the dogs for a walk. You can still do that as long as you stay away from the people outside. 6 feet distance.
Did the dogs have to stay 6 feet away?
No, actually, dogs can't get coronavirus. It was one of the first things I looked at. So
good to know. So the doggos can play, but we have to chill apart from each other.
But I wouldn't let a stranger touch your dog because I guess it could possibly live on their back or something.
Ooh, good advice.
So maybe tell the stranger to buzz off.
You were telling me last week that certainly band people are being affected because you can't go on tour and that's funny. But people are helping out, which sounds sick.
Yeah, there's a foundation called Music Cares, which is I think run by the same organization that runs the Grammys, and they're kind of a nonprofit that helps musicians for expenses that come up out of nowhere, if you don't have insurance, they'll help you with if you need to get a root canal or something. Is
okay.
Types of things that I've heard people use it for. They're sending me money to pay my rent for the next couple of months.
Yeah.
So, and it only took. They responded to me within the day, so it was cool.
So fast.
People are helping out.
Thanks, Dan. Lovely to hear from you. We will check in with you soon. Story so far. If you want to get on the show, let me know. So certainly our state is doing that as a federal government. What's happening? Great question. So yesterday, Senate Democrats blocked the almost $2 trillion plan that was being proposed by Republicans, specifically because they were afraid there weren't enough protections for workers. They saw the plan as primarily benefiting businesses, and not enough accountability was being put in there to ensure that workers would retain their jobs. So the plan was blocked, which means it was a procedural vote, so it wasn't necessarily a yes or no vote that was happening there. But the House Democrats are also coming up with a plan right now. So certainly politics are playing a large role in this. It's frustrating for a lot of people that we have politicians that are trying to do different things and have different priorities. And sometimes we don't even think of those priorities. So in some cases, these are things that are important to include into bills. But you also need to balance that idea of getting things done quickly. And the nature of American government is sadly slow. So this is one of those cases where democracy is in many ways frustrating. So if you are frustrated, I think that's fine and that's fair. But do know that Democrats and Republicans are working really hard to ensure that our economy does well, our healthcare system stays strong, and that individuals are getting the help that they need. Which, looking at some other things, so one question that came up yesterday, we had a great live stream on Instagram, Jeremy M. Shea, if you want to follow me. And I was out kayaking, and a question came up of how long do you think this will last? And that's a really good question. I think a lot of us need to have some sort of idea of how long to expect our current situation to be. So, looking at this article, which came out a couple days ago on the Boston Globe, one thing that a lot of scientists are looking at for you to realize when things are starting to improve is when you'll see the amount of cases dropping over consecutive weeks. And that's a sign that the social distancing measures that we're putting into place are working, that more people aren't getting sick. So once the spread starts to slow down, then we're going to get back to a pretty good place where we won't need a shelter-in-place order. Now, once we don't see a lot of infections, we're going to start moving around more because we feel safer. Now, what happens when that occurs is naturally with people interacting more, then the virus is going to spread. So we're going to start seeing this kind of wave of infections, drop of infections, and increases of them. And we're really expecting to see that over the next 12 to 18 months. And the thing that is really going to end it, frankly, is a vaccine. Toilet paper, I know I've told this story to some students before, but for a while, corn cobs were used as toilet paper, not with the corn on it, but once the corn was removed, the cobs themselves were used to wipe. Sounds unpleasant. The end of ropes, also woof. So it really looks like the first toilet paper, 1857. So it really hasn't been that long if we're looking at the scope of human history, how long we've had toilet paper. So shout out to Joseph C. Gady. Thank you, sir. You're a good man. You could practice some cherry spitting. ESPN, if I don't have cable, so I can't vouch for what's on ESPN right now, but I have heard rumors that they are doing some coverage of sports that you wouldn't normally see. So cherry spitting, I just saw this article, which I thought was pretty great, of Chloe Bartz, and she is a women's division champion, 3-time champion. So practice your cherry spitting, y'all. It could bring you great fame and probably zero fortune. All right, those are the news headlines. First edition of Don't Freak Out. Woke up today, I found a tick on me. Tick. But don't freak out. It'll be fine. The CDC, Center for Disease Control. What their suggestions are is voiceover time. Is that you want to use a set of tweezers. Tweezers are going to grip the tick and you're just going to pull it out. There's a lot of other remedies out there, which include Vaseline, an extinguished match so it's still hot. So the idea is that the Vaseline is going to suffocate the tick and it's going to pop out so it can get air. The problem with those ones is you don't want what's in the tick already. That tick's, feeding off of your blood. I don't know if this tick has bitten anything else. If it has, the idea is that you don't want it to regurgitate anything into you, especially Lyme disease for here on Cape Cod. You don't want that to get into your bloodstream itself. So the idea with the tweezers is that you're simply plucking it out and you're not giving it a chance to do any of that. So let's do it. So you're going to go down by the head, as close to the skin and the head as possible, and you're just going to grip it. And you don't want to twist it or anything. You're simply lifting it out of the spot. And you get it out. All right, so after you remove the tick, what you want to do is you're going to wash your hands as well as the area of your tick bite. So let's go do that. I think there is just a tiny bit of the head still in there, which is fine. So if you are in a situation where you don't have tweezers, if you're in a situation where you do have tweezers and there's still a piece of the tick left in there, it's not the end of the world. The big thing to know with especially Lyme disease is that the tick actually has to be biting you for 36 hours
for you to get Lyme disease. So it is a very long time that the tick has to be biting you. I work outside year-round, and especially in the summer, I have ticks on me all the time. I don't even know how many times I've been bit by ticks. But the most important step is vigilance. Before you even get to the step of removing a tick, having to remove a tick, you can just pluck them off of you. A game I like to play is when I'm out in the woods on a walk, and I hope all of you are going for walks, and I hope this doesn't freak you out, because we need to get outside, and you don't want to be cloistered inside just on the fear that a tick might bite you. So one thing I like to do, play a game of who can find the most ticks on them. So then you're actively looking for ticks and you want to find them. Whereas if you are like, ooh, there's ticks, I don't ever want to see them, you're going to see ticks. So might as well make a game out of it, make it fun. With Lyme disease, there's often the idea that you're going to have a bullseye, so a red rash that occurs around the tick bite. That might happen. And if it does, definitely that's a warning sign for you. And if it doesn't happen, well, that's fine too. You might still get a fever at some point. Granted, right now I know fevers and things are very worrisome. But with Lyme disease, really the only fear that you would have is if you leave it untreated. So it never hurts to be safe. It never hurts to take precautions. But don't freak out. You can't predict the future. You can only do what you can do in the moment you have. So if you get a tick, stay calm, find some tweezers, remove it, and then monitor the spot. Monitor yourself. Mr. Shea's edition of Don't Freak Out, tick version. Thanks, y'all. Don't freak out. Today we're making popcorn. Shout out to Delaney, who asked the question of what my favorite movie was. So, also shout out to everyone else that sent things in. I'm going to explain to you what I'm about to do, and then as I'm cooking, I'll talk about some things people have sent in, answer some questions that people have said, and make some sweet, sweet popcorn. So, all you need for popcorn, super simple. All of you are binging some shows, binging some movies right now, hopefully binging some books. I was up late last night finishing a book called The Overstory. It's incredible. However, all you need, some butter. I'm going to melt my butter on the side, and I'll explain that in a minute. You need some popcorn. I'm just using 1/3 of a cup, so you don't need a whole lot. You need some tin foil, and you need some salt. And then the last part is some oil. This is some grapeseed oil. So what I'm going to do is first off, I'm using a bowl for this. I like bowls because when the kernels pop, they will move up, which allows the unpopped kernels to just slide down the sides. Alton Brown, Good Eats, there we go. He released a video yesterday, which I just saw also inspired me. He uses the popcorn bowl method as well, so shout out to Alton Brown. However, Alton, you did screw up on the temperature. So, I'm going to add first about 2 tablespoons of oil, just to coat the bottom. You don't want too little oil. And then I'm going to set the temperature not too high. Below medium high is where you want it to be. So, I'm going to let that heat up a little bit, and while we're talking, I am going to just put the butter on low. We don't want to cook it too fast, because then it might burn in there. So, oil on the stove. Going to add some popcorn in there. I'm also going to add some salt. I'm going to cover it in tin foil. So, why tin foil? Well, good question. If you don't have a bowl, a pot's fine. However, don't use the lid. So every piece of popcorn, every kernel that is going to get popped, the escaped kernel, is once it pops, it's going to release steam. So if you've ever made popcorn in a pot with a lid,
by the end of it, it's just covered in moisture on the top. So you don't really want that because that can get your popcorn soggy. So you do want to have some ventilation for your popcorn. So if you're just using a pot, once again, I would use tin foil so that that steam can escape. And you'll start seeing that in a second. I'm going to use just some towels here. So butter's melting, popcorn's cooking. My favorite movie. Oh, I love the movie Field of Dreams. I love baseball. I think the movie's a cool story. Kevin Costner's awesome. Saw him in New Hampshire 2 months ago. What else? What I've watched this week, just rewatched Inside Out. Great movie. Highly recommend it. The new Tom Hanks as Mr. Rogers movie. Ooh, we're starting to pop. Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is awesome. Love the Lord of the Rings movies. Saw those at the midnight release, which was pretty great. Saw the Harry Potter movies at the midnight release too. However, the books are definitely better. What other movies do I like? I've been documentary, which I was going to show students this year if we had time, which I don't know if we will have time. It is on Woodstock. It's on Netflix right now. Highly recommend that. So yeah, some of my favorite movies. Shout out to Mia, who sent in a photo from what she's been doing. Went out to the West Barnstable Conservation Land, which is a awesome place to go. I highly recommend anyone going out there. Sarah and Megan, also shout out to you, made some corn muffins. Hold on. So you hear the popcorn popping really quick right now. Once it starts to slow down, I'll shake it a little. And if that slowdown keeps going, we're going to take it off. So, you don't want to be the one that leaves your popcorn on too long because then it will burn. So, while it's still hot, while it's still toasty, we are going to add this. Ooh, yeah, that looks great. We're going to add this butter, which is now nice and melted. So I'm just going to drizzle it on top. This is only about a little less than a tablespoon of butter. It's about a tablespoon, actually. I don't like a ton of butter. If you like more butter, turn it on. All right. So, Sarah and Megan, those made some corn muffins, had some tea this morning, so that sounds awesome. Looks awesome. You probably now have a bunch of corn muffins that you're like, what am I going to do with? So, funny enough, Wednesday's video looks at what to do with extra corn muffins. So I myself have, since I live alone, have a ton of corn muffins on hand, and I needed to figure out what to do with them. So I'm making a video on that. So everyone else, if you haven't made corn muffins, do so. And if you're worried about what do I do with all the leftovers, don't worry, I got your back. So popcorn with some butter, heck yeah. If you want to add other things to your popcorn, go for it. Hot sauce, nutritional yeast, cheese powder. I've made like dessert popcorn before, which, some kettle corn. Kettle corn's awesome. Instead of, so that step where I put the oil in and the salt, add in some sugar in there. And then when it pops, it's gonna just get nice and sweet. Afterwards, you could drizzle some hot sauce on there. Maybe not hot sauce, cold sauce. You could get all sorts of versions of popcorn. So, lots of fun. It's super easy. I barely paid attention. However, make sure once you hear that those kernels stop going, and if you don't have a bowl, make sure you are shaking it decently. Take it off the heat. Even if you take it off early, that's fine. Then you'll just have a little less, but at least it's not burnt, because then that burnt flavor gets in there. So, pay attention, make some popcorn, watch some movies, read some books. Let me know questions you have, everyone. Send me some other stories, some tales about what you're doing, send some videos. Tag me on social media at The Mr. Shea Show. And we'll catch you next time. Have a great night.